to another episode of Amanda Homestead. My name is Amanda, and today this is our third set of videos on how to make cured pork meats. The other two that we did, first of all, we showed you how to make a copa, which is basically like a capicolo, which is a cut from the neck of the pig, which when it is dry cured and sliced, it's very much like a prosciutto. A lot of people may argue with me about that, but I think that they're pretty similar for our purposes. The second one we did was how to cure a pork cheek to make guanciale, which is an Italian kind of cured meat. It's almost like a pancetta, like a dry cured bacon, which you can either use in recipes where it will be cooked, or you can dry it further and have it just sliced on your charcuterie board. The last thing that we're going to be doing in this series today is making something that probably no one, unless they're kind of really into this stuff, has really ever heard of, which is called lardo. So what this basically is this is a cured pork fat. Now, I think in this world of anti-saturated fats, this is not a very common thing to see because it's probably considered to be pretty unhealthy by a lot of people. But if you think about getting meat from a pig that has been pasture raised, heritage pig, the fat of those animals tends to be much healthier than the fat of our factory farmed pigs. These pigs will have a much better omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, and so in fact this is not an unhealthy source of fat. So this is fat from the back of the pig. It's called a fatback for that reason. This is where the pig kind of accumulates a lot of its fatty tissue, and it is basically like just a big slab of fatty tissue. So long ago, people used to cure this in like containers of just salt and salty brine, and they would store it for a long time, 6 months, a year, and they would do that with herbs and spices. And they did it because they had to, right? They wanted to prevent this fat from going rancid, and so storing it and curing it in salt actually helped. But by adding all these kind of herbs and spices, they actually found that they created this like really beautiful product. And what you can do with this is once it's cured, and it does take a long time. It's going to take about 6 months, so this is a bit of a time commitment. But you don't need anything besides your refrigerator. Like some of the other ones we were talking about, you need to have a curing chamber. You don't need that for this. All you need is your refrigerator, because it's going to stay in there the whole time for 6 months in its kind of salt and brine, and just gradually penetrate and soak up all that good flavor. So once it comes out of there and it's ready to go, I mean, you can keep it in there for 2 years if you want, but 6 months is kind of like the basic, what you want to do. Is you can take this and use it in lots of different ways. You can slice it super thin, and you can just kind of have it on a piece of warm bread and it'll kind of melt in there. You can slice it thin and wrap it around a fig and then just put that under the broiler for a few minutes, and it's beautiful. You can use it to fry with, and it'll be like a flavored pork fat. So if you want to kind of fry up some potatoes, fry up some vegetables in like a beautiful flavored salty pork fat, that's a great thing to do. You can just have it thinly sliced and just put it on your charcuterie board. Whatever you like. There's lots of different options for different things you can do with this. So a little bit weird, but stay with me. Not a bad thing to do, especially because if you want to use the whole animal, this is kind of one of those really cool things to do, right? So we got a whole pig, and that's why we've cured the copa. We did the 2 pork cheeks. We are actually kind of rendering down some lard so that we can make pastries and use it to cook with. But the thickest part of the fatback I wanted to make into these this cured lardo. So what you're looking for, which again, you'll probably have to go to a farmer or a butcher, is you want as thick a piece of the fatback as possible, at least an inch, which can be a little bit difficult to track down. But so you can get 2 or 3 inches, but that's probably on some very kind of rare heritage breeds. Our pork breeds that they have in the supermarket are much more lean. So this is from a Berkshire pig, and it's kind of at least that inch. The thickest part of the fatback was at least that inch, and that's kind of what you want. So in addition to our pasture-raised pork fatback, We also want some sea salt. This can be, it doesn't have to be sea salt, it can also be kosher salt, pickling salt, as long as it doesn't have iodine in it, all right? You just want something that's a non-iodized salt. Doesn't matter, it can be fine, it can be coarse, because we're gonna do all this by weight, so it doesn't really matter. So we've got our salt, then we've got our curing salt. In this case, it's gonna be a curing salt number 2. So we talked a little bit on other videos about the difference between the 2 curing salts. Curing salt number 2 has got salt plus nitrite plus nitrate. And the nitrate is important because it doesn't break down as fast. And so this is designed, the curing salt number 2 is designed for things that are gonna cure for longer, right? Because we don't want the bacteria to kind of have access to that. So that's why we want curing salt number 2. In addition to those things, those are the things you need to do to preserve it. In addition to that, we also want some things for flavor. So we're gonna add some black pepper. We're gonna add some white pepper. I've got some dried sage from my garden this past summer. I'm gonna use that. And then I've also got some bay leaves as well, so we're gonna use those. And again, all of this is gonna be done by weight. So what you're gonna want also is a scale, a digital scale. So the way we're gonna do this is, we're gonna start by weighing out the amount of fatback that we have, and then we're going to want to figure out percentages for the ingredients. So we're gonna have 3% of the weight of our fatback in salt, 0.25% of the fatback weight in the curing salt number 2, and 0.5% of the weight of the fatback in sage and in the different peppers. And then also, actually I think I'll probably do 0.25 each, just so there's not too much pepper. And then also in the bay leaves as well. So usually what I do for the kind of math on this is I will take the weight of this and then I'll divide it by 100. So that gives me the weight of 1% of it, right? So then I just have to multiply it by how many percent I want. So if this weighs 1,000 grams, let's say, and I divide it by 100, then that's 10 grams for each percent. So then if I want 3% of salt, that means I need 30 grams of salt. And if I want 0.25% of this, that means I'm gonna have 2.5 grams, right? Because you times it by 0.25%. So just make sure you don't put in too much of this, because too much of it can be toxic for you, right? So you do have to be careful with your math. Make sure, you know, measure twice, cut once, weigh twice, mix once, whatever. Anyway, what we'll do now is we'll go away and we'll get weighing this, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how we're gonna measure out the ingredients. Okay, so now we have all of our ingredients weighed in the percentages that we talked about. So we have, and I've written it all down, and it's important to kind of make sure that you're writing all this down so that way you can track the weight of this. Not that but the other things you need to measure how much weight it loses, but this doesn't really have much moisture in it, so you're not expecting a lot of weight loss, but it's just important to write it down just for the sake of keeping track of all your ingredients. So we have 1,780 grams of this fatback. Okay, so based on our percentages, so for 3% salt, that is going to give us 53 grams. We have 4.5 grams of our curing powder number 2. Apologize that it's the same color as my containers. We have 9 grams each of sage and bay leaf. I put them in together. I actually did 1.5% of black pepper, so that ends up being 27 grams. And then I've got my white pepper here, and we did 0.5% of that. And so again, that's 9 grams. So what we're gonna do is we'll just mix them all into this bowl here. So we've got in here is our bay leaf and our sage. And so in that, we're gonna put our regular salt. And then we're gonna put our curing powder number 2, so you can kind of see how much it is. It's really not that much. Okay, so a little of this stuff goes a long way. Too much of it can be toxic, so make sure that you're very, very careful about your cure number 2, about how much you need. We're gonna mix in our black pepper. And then lastly, we're going to mix in our white pepper. And then I'm going to mix that all around. Make sure it's all well blended. Especially with the curing salts, you really want to make sure that this is blended well so that it's going to be evenly distributed. And that is a beautiful smelling mix. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a, just like a regular baking dish, and I'm going to put our first piece of fatback in here. I'm going to flip it this way so that it's kind of the bottom side down, not for any particular reason. And then I'm going to start coating the fatback with our mixture, making sure that every exposed part is covered. Okay, so once we've got that part done, I'll flip it over. My doggy is going to want to get in. So hang on. We'll pause for a moment and let my doggy in, otherwise he's just going to keep scratching. All right, dog's in. All right, so now dog is very interested. Not surprising. So, oh, hey, I could have that. All right, so now we're going to do our next piece. Same thing. Just imagine how much a treat this is going to be. I know it's going to be a while, but when it's ready, it's going to be super awesome. Okay. All right, and then we're just going to carry on doing all the pieces, making sure they're all covered. Okay, so now we have all of our pieces of fatback, and it is just coated in this beautiful aromatic mixture of curing salts and spices. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pack this into vacuum sealed bags. You could probably just use a Ziploc bag as long as you get all the air out. That's really important because this is going to be in your fridge for a long time, and the contact with air can cause that to go rancid. So you want to make sure you get like pretty much all the air out. The other thing we want to do is we are not just going to store it in the clear bags. It needs to be out of any contact with light, because the light can also cause the fat to go rancid, and again, because it's in there for 6 months, it matters. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to probably, after I wrap this in Ziploc, I'm going to wrap it in a black plastic bag, throw it in the back of my fridge for 6 months, and then it'll be ready. All right, so let's get it wrapped in our Ziploc or in our vacuum sealed, and then we'll come back. So here is our vacuum sealed pork fatback, ready to go into the fridge as soon as I have wrapped it in some black plastic. You can also wrap it in tin foil, anything that's going to keep the light out. So, because again, this is going to be in your fridge for 6 months. And I mean, this is a fair amount of fatback. I can't imagine wanting to do more than this. And it's not that big. So it's not going to take up that much space in your fridge, even though it seems like it's a long time. Just make sure you set your calendar so that you don't forget about it in there, all right? So it's going to be a good long while before I can do another video to show you how it turns out. But just believe me, this is going to be worth the wait. So thank you very much for joining me on another episode of I Demand a Homestead. If you enjoy our videos, please feel free to press the subscribe button, and we'll see you again soon. And if you like this video, make sure you check out the other ones on making copa and making cured pork cheek, or I can never say this right, guanciale, which is also a wonderful cured meat that you can have on your charcuterie board. All right, have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.